Hello, mystery writers. This is Write a Killer Mystery. I'm Zara Altair. Today we're going to talk about before you write a scene and how scene checklists can help you before you get started and after you finish writing. Scenes are the building blocks of your story. There's no getting around it. So each scene moves the story forward. And as you build your story, you can alternate between action and reaction scenes. So before you write a scene, you need to know the basic structure of the type of scene that comes next in your mystery. And after you've written your scene, use the checklist to make sure your scene meets the story requirements. So there's two types of scenes, and you'll use those action and reaction scenes to build the sequence of your mystery, and you alternate between the proactive and the reactive to build your story in increments. First, your protagonist sleuth does something, and that's the action. Then your sleuth has to deal with the consequences of taking action, and that's the reaction. And both types of scene incorporate conflict, but the conflict is different depending on the type of scene. So let's take a look at the differences. The proactive scene. Here you're going to challenge your protagonist. I call these trigger scenes. They move the story forward by involving your sleuth in a problem. He has a goal. She tries to achieve the goal, but obstacles challenge her as the scene moves forward. And at the end of the scene, there's a setback. By the end of the scene, the protagonist has not only failed to reach their goal, but has a setback that leaves them worse off than at the beginning. So let's take a look at the checklist. You've kind of got your outline, and you know what you want to have happen in your scene, and you write your scene. And then you can go through the checklist after you've written your scene to make sure you have all the elements that you need. So who is the primary point of view character? And you stay with that one character throughout the scene. And what is that character's goal? And for each scene, you keep the goal simple. This is one small part of the story, so you want one goal for the scene. And then you create the objective of the goal so the reader can visualize the success. The reader knows that your sleuth is going to do this thing, and the sleuth is hoping for a consequence, a positive consequence, and your reader is like, yeah, if it does this and it works, then this is going to happen. So make the goal worthwhile for your sleuth and for the story. This is really important, because otherwise you're going to cut the scene. It doesn't matter how beautiful your writing is. It doesn't matter how charming, endearing, or nasty the character is. If it's worthwhile in this story, if it's not worthwhile in this story, then you want to cut the scene. So make the goal achievable in the protagonist's view. So they set out to do something, and as far as they're concerned, they're going to be able to reach their goal. On the other hand, at the same time, you want to make it difficult to achieve. I mean, you want to have some kind of challenge for your sleuth, so don't make it a slam dunk. Then create the conflict that keeps your sleuth from reaching their goal. This is like the pivot conflict of this particular scene. So even with the obstacles, don't let your sleuth give up, and make the obstacle unexpected, because remember, it starts out and your sleuth thinks, this may be a challenge, but I can do this. So the obstacle's going to come from an unexpected place that your sleuth had overlooked when they were thinking about how they could actually achieve their goal. So in each scene, put your hero or heroine in the worst possible situations as they seek what seems like an obtainable goal at the beginning of the scene. So that's pretty much how you run through your proactive scene after you've written the scene. If there are any missing parts, you can go and put them in. All right, then after that happens and your sleuth decides, yep, I'm going to go do this thing. It should be okay. It may have a challenge or two, but I can accomplish it. And they don't accomplish it. Then you have the next scene, which is the reactive scene. So now that your sleuth is thwarted, it's time to give them some space. And this scene is where your sleuth makes a decision about what to do next. So this is basically a decision-making scene. It's not necessarily filled with a lot of action. It's about how they reconcile what just happened with what they're going to do next. So you begin that scene with the protagonist's reaction to what just happened. And now you've got to get your sleuth to figure out what the options are so they can review options. And if the setback was significant, your sleuth may have no apparent options and he needs to look at his dilemma and choose an action. Sometimes it can be so confounding that nothing is the apparent next step. So he has to work through and think about what that next objective is going to be. And in the final part of this scene, the protagonist must make a decision. In other words, the action of the reactive scene is a decision. And so the decision is the goal for the next action scene. So if you see how this works, there's action, there's a setback, there's your sleuth considering what to do next, making a decision which sets up the goal for the next action scene. If you can understand that, it will help you move your story along scene by scene. So let's take a look at what to do and what to check after you've written your reactive scene, because it's a little bit different. It isn't so filled with action, and it's got a decision as the action. So the basic elements to include in the reactive scene when your protagonists make a decision are clarifying the protagonist's vision of the problem. First, she's got to sort out what just happened, and she needs to know where the problem is before she can make a solution. What was it that didn't work? What was it that kept her from reaching her goal in the active scene before the reactive scene? So keep the reader with the protagonist by visualizing what the character will do next. And the decision for the next action should be in line with your character's personality and values. I mean, it seems like that should go without saying, but you have to make it realistic. That decision to do something has to be within your character's personality makeup. That doesn't mean it's not very challenging. You can make it super challenging, especially toward the end, but it has to fit with their personality as you have constructed it within the story. And you want to make that decision difficult enough that the reader has doubts about whether your character can do what they decide. So reactive scenes provide a way for your character to make really bad decisions, which will create even greater conflict later on. So think about this. Giving your character bad decisions is going to heighten the conflict and heighten the tension for the reader, So don't be afraid of sending them down the wrong path of making a really bad decision. We all do it, so why wouldn't your character do it as well? Plus, there's a lot of outside forces. There's oftentimes a, a time limit. They've got to do this by tomorrow or 3 days from now or whatever. So it's okay for it to be challenging. Um, and the bad decisions opens up your story to new possibilities. So don't be afraid of bad decisions. Your protagonist can be blind to the motivations of another character. You may find that getting into the boardroom isn't a slam dunk. Whatever it is that your character decides to do next may be more challenging and much more difficult than they thought as they are thinking about what to do next. So reactive scenes are your opportunity to build conflict and tension because the following action may be based on a very wrong decision that seemed right at the time for your character. Okay, I hope that helps you understand the action and the reaction scenes and how, as they alternate, they move the story forward. And this structure really helps. Alternating scenes may seem forced, like when you think about, okay, I'm going to have an action scene, and I'm going to have a reaction scene, and another action scene based on the reaction scene. That may feel forced in your mind, but readers want and expect your characters to have problems and overcome obstacles. They love that. That's what readers love. They want to see that your character makes a decision and then it was, oops, a bad decision, and how are they going to get themselves out of this? Readers want and expect your characters to have these problems. It raises attention, and unless you are very compulsive, you don't need to write these lists down. You just want to have an idea in your head as you're writing and as you approach a new scene, that you are aware that this is an action scene where things are going to happen, or it's a reactive scene to something bad that happened before, and now your sleuth needs to make a decision. So just know the type of scene you're writing and create the obstacles, either to action or decision making, and then write the scene. So conflict, physical, psychological, and mental, in each scene will help your readers engage and move your story forward. I hope that helps. I want to thank my patrons who support this video series and my writing. And also, if you found this helpful, please subscribe and don't forget to tick that notification bell so you find out about the next Write a Killer mystery session. And in the meantime, write a killer mystery.